a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind.
Visit StogieGeeks.com/Debonaire for a list of retailers who carry Debonaire cigars. Buy some today and get a little more Debonaire. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stogie Geeks Show. This is our Debonaire Ideal segment for this evening. We're going to talk about I guess you could say top lists, Will, because some are top 25, some are top 10, some are top 20, some are top 13. I don't know. Everyone has their lists, right?
Yes.
So I don't know where you want to start. I do want to say, I think before we get started, that everyone has their lists, and I think everyone has a slightly different methodology for coming up with their lists. I think everyone probably has access to different cigars that make up their list. I don't think there's one group that is, one, doing it the same, and two, has access to all the same cigars that is producing these lists. I mean, we look at Cigar Aficionado, Cigar Snob, all of the various podcast blogs that are out there. It's all different, Will. And I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, you and I are different.
You and I are different in our lists. And I mean, it's just based on what you smoke. And there's no like one single person or group of people that are smoking every cigar on the market or every new cigar that comes out. I mean, it's just impossible. And of course, your selection of that list is objective. I mean, it's your opinion, right?
Yeah.
Now, Will, I think you paid attention to some more of the lists more than I did, and I want to ask you, what commonalities did you see between the lists? Because this is an area we can say, well, you know, these couple cigars appeared on a lot of people's different lists, and that's somehow how I determine which ones that, if I haven't tried that cigar, I want to go seek out as I look at all the lists, and then I kind of pick out commonalities.
Yeah. I'm going to put Cigar Aficionados separate because theirs is more of a tasting tournament. We can get into that in a little bit. But there were definitely what I saw, and I want to say this Debonaire. There were, I think Fred kind of talked about it. I saw a lot of brand loyalty. On the list this year.
Well, and you know, Cigar Aficionado's been accused of that in the past.
They have. But in particular, I saw if there was a connection in terms of that brand with the people doing that list, that cigar showed up on the list. And I'll give you an example. There weren't a lot of Fuentes on lists or Padrones. I had a Padron as my number one, but there weren't a lot of those. But what I did see is I saw a lot of the Nick Melillo and Steve Saka this year.
I did too.
Who have a connection, and I'm not implying bias or anything, but and a couple of years ago when House of Emilio was on a roll, there was a lot of House of Emilio cigars. There was a connection. That's what the cigars I tended to see on a lot of the lists happen this year.
Interesting. And not that any of these are bad cigars. Again, it's objective, and it's really hard to stay truly objective, right? I mean, you see some of our sponsor cigars on our list too. I mean, and a lot of that can speak to that those are the cigars that you have smoked a lot of because they were made available to you, right? If you're located next to a shop that is really big on XYZ manufacturer, you're going to smoke a lot of XYZ manufacturer. You're going to go to XYZ manufacturer's website, events rather. You may meet someone from XYZ, and the people at the store are going to really be behind XYZ manufacturer because it's a close connection, and that cigar may land on your list. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all, because anyone who's putting in a list has smoked a lot of different cigars, and that one is being memorable to them. And that's just the way it works.
Is it easier to include someone's cigar on a list, or is it easier to not include someone's cigar on the list?
Well, I think it can go both ways, right?
Yeah.
It can be easy. You can say, well, I smoked a lot of cigar, and I really like it, so I'm going to put it on the list. But then you're like, am I giving it a fair shake? And then you're like, well, if I don't put that cigar on the list, someone going to be mad at me, kind of thing. So there's a lot that goes into the lists, and look, what we said is when Will and I go through our lists, these are based on the cigars that I've smoked this year, and also based on cigars that are released this year. And I think that really helps us hone in on making that criteria so that our lists are closer to as objective as we can get, right?
Yes.
Because we're limiting it. We're limiting it.
Now
you hear me talk about a cigar this week that I'm like, this cigar's been out for a long time, but I think this year's whatever that cigar is really, really good. And that's a double-edged sword, right? So this year's release of XYZ cigar is good. Does that mean that some other years weren't as good? Does that mean there is inconsistency in the blend? Or maybe the cigars that I've smoked from that particular blend have been aged at various points, and I like this cigar very fresh. And maybe someone else likes it really aged. And again, because it depends on the reviewer, right? So, that's one of the things that plays into it. It's one of the things that plays into the cigar aficionado list for me is they will choose a cigar, and I'm like, that cigar's been on the market for 3 or 4 years. And I'm not saying it's a bad cigar or a great cigar or anywhere in between. I mean, we'll rate the cigar. It is what it is when we smoked it. But, when they rate a cigar that's been on the market, it's like, well, has that aged? Is that this year's crop? And it's a hard thing to track, right? I mean, when we acquire cigars, Will, and we smoke them when we review them, we have a general idea of the age on that cigar, but truthfully, Will, we have no idea how long that cigar's been aging. How long has that cigar been sitting at the manufacturer? How long has that cigar been sitting at the retail shop? How long it's been sitting in our humidor? Those are all variables, some of which we have control over, other ones we don't. And even the how long it's been in our humidor, you and I both know anyone that maintains a humidor of 50 cigars or more, you totally lose track of how long that's been in your humidor, right? I mean, unless, like, sometimes I go back on my email if I ordered it online and I know when I ordered it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the exceptions to that are cigars that have a date on them, right? Debonaire puts the date inside the band. Cuban cigars put a stamp on the box. So some cigars we do know the age, right, when they were boxed, kind of thing is usually what you'll get from that. So with those, I think we can have a little more certainty that, and you've seen this with Cuban cigars, right? Like this year's Monte Cristo No. 2 is smoking great, and I know that because the ones I smoked that had the box stamp on them were better than the older ones that had an older box date on them. So with some cigars, with most cigars, though, you don't know. So I think that puts, there's a lot of opinion, I guess, is what I'm coming down to is my point is there's a lot of opinion that goes into all these lists.
So this was the first year I kind of questioned whether or not picking cigars from the current year was the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And there was one cigar that made me think about it, and it was Sobre Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. That cigar didn't really hit the shelves until mid-November. Now, I like that cigar. It was a top 25 cigar.
Mm-hmm.
But I struggled to put that cigar higher because it just was not enough time.
Right. And Steve was very transparent with that.
And he was. And as
he told us all that. He told us anytime he made an appearance or made a statement, posted on Facebook, the note that was included when he sent it to cigar media outlets said, this cigar needs to sit. So I totally agree with you there, Will. We rated Steve's cigar when we smoked it. But even when we smoked them now, that was a month ago. Maybe they got better since then. And what are they going to be in 3 or 6 months from now?
We don't know. So that's why I question if
his
it's the right
cigar,
approach.
and like you're saying, Will, right? What you're saying is his cigar that came out in 2015 when we smoke it in June of this year, right, after it's got 6-7 months of age on it, that very well could be a top 10 cigar. But it's not going to get a top 10 rating because it wasn't released in 2016. It was released in 2015. So,
But should Steve be penalized for that?
right.
That's why I started to kind of say, is it, my friend John Partlow came up with a really interesting idea. He said, what if you looked at going with a 2-year window?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about it right now. I've asked a few people. More people have said no. More people said no. I kind of lean against it because I think it's going to introduce a big level of complexity into something that's already, I think, too complex, and I'm making it. But that's why I do the aged cigar list, because the aged cigar list, I look, I look at that, and I'm saying, all right, maybe that cigar wasn't a cigar last year, but it's not necessarily the most improved cigar, but it's the ones that really sustained some time on the market, had some type of consistency, second and third batches coming out.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing, is when there's a second or third shipment, is that as consistent as the first shipment. And that's why I struggle.
But the other thing, too, I mean, do we just come out every year and say, maybe we do a subsidiary list, a second list, a top 10 list of these are my favorite cigars I smoked in the past year.
Yeah.
And and we at the Stogies, we track all the cigars we smoke for a year, and we rate them all, and we archive them all on the website, so we could
go back,
say what got an Oasis rating for the past year that I rated in the past year, and maybe that's 5 cigars, and then maybe there's another 15 or 20 that got a Chuck Norris rating, and we pick our top 5 out of those Chuck Norris rating. We come up with our top 10 cigars we smoked that year. I mean, that Fuente Anniversario, what is that called? It's a big, long name. The Destino Siglo Anniversario, the De Amor, right?
The
De Amor.
Yeah.
De Amor.
De Amor.
Is that little double perfecto? That was an Oasis rating from both of us, but it wasn't released in 2015.
Right.
So it's not on our list. But
So
that's a cigar that you and I both rated Oasis, which tends to be rare, right?
Yes. We smoked it. Yep. And
so there's your proof right there.
so then I went back and said, so Cigar Aficionado is getting beat up. They get beat up every year, and it's kind of like Groundhog Day why they get beat up every year, because there's not new cigars on the list.
Right.
Now, the one thing I'll say is theirs is a tasting tournament, and they talk about how it's a blind tasting tournament. Now, my thing maybe with that is maybe there's a point where, for example, Liga Privada, great cigar. Liga Privada number 9 got a number 10 this year. It's a great, great cigar, okay? It probably was overdue for a number 10 rating. I probably should have had that years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe is there a point that says, all right, it's been out for 5 years. Maybe it shouldn't be included in that tournament.
Right. And
Or
I tell you what if they come out with a new size? Like the box press Liga Privada, I thought was the best Liga Privada number 9 that I've smoked in a really long time. I thought that thing was friggin' awesome.
But do you penalize Liga Privada if they have a really good crop of tobacco that comes in there?
Yeah.
What, should they be penalized? It raised more questions where for the first time I had more of these questions. And then who's to say, again, that if we did a tournament exactly like Cigar Aficionados, we probably would have some strange cigars, I think, come out of it. Is my point. I'm not saying we would have had what they had this year.
Well, and you may or may not know the answer to this, but in Cigar Aficionado's top 25, is that based on everything they've done for that whole year, and they're keeping the totals, right? So it's not just like they say, okay, we're going to do a tournament for our top 25, and we're going to go, smoke the top 50 rated cigars, and we're all going to smoke them blind again, and then do it. But it's based on their whole year of smoking, right?
So from what I understand, and I think Dave Savona was on Cigar Jukebox and talked about this, they rate cigars throughout the whole year. They rate cigars, not new cigars. They'll rate cigars throughout the year.
All cigars.
All cigars. It could be 5 years old. It could be 10 years old, And, for example, that's Monte Cristo number 2 a couple years ago was rated. It kind of I think they set a threshold for minimum score, and then they go back out and they repurchase those cigars.
Oh, okay. So they do go repurchase everything over a certain score. Okay.
They have a tasting coordinator go repurchase those. They unban them, and then it goes into this elimination tournament. And I guess there's cigars that are eliminated, and eventually they come out with the winner. This year it was the My Father Le Bijou.
And that was the Bellicoso?
The box press torpedo,
Box press torpedo.
which is, by the way, it's an excellent cigar.
Now, is that a new size recently? That wasn't an
No.
original size, was it?
Wasn't original, but it's about 4 or 5 years old. It was a line extension they did a few years ago.
I've smoked that cigar. It is a good cigar.
And when that cigar, I remember it hit the Charlotte market, I'm thinking about 2011 or 12, and Big My Father's Shop, that cigar was a huge hit when it came out.
Right.
So why it took this long for it to get number one, it's an interesting scenario. But, in general, I think if this was 2012, no one probably would have been complaining about it.
Mm-hmm.
But was this year's better than it was three? I can't say that either. That's where you got all these other variables that go into that.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. Will, what was your number one cigar of the year?
It was the Padron 50th Anniversary Maduro.
Interesting. See, I thought
you like the natural. You like the
I
natural.
like the natural a little better. I do have another natural Maduro, so I am going to go revisit one of each of those. So
I smoked more of the Maduros than you did.
Yeah. I smoked one. I only smoked one of each.
Because I was able to get them when the price came out of the $100 range.
I didn't get one each of an additional one until after we did the last show of 2015. So
I feel confident. This was the first year, and I'm not trying to toot my horn. A lot of people said, yeah, but a lot of people didn't rate that cigar because it was I don't want to say it was a tougher cigar, but it was a more expensive. Look, it was
a tougher cigar to get. It was expensive and it was tougher to get. I agree.
Was, and hey, look, can't fault anyone for that. That's still going for $40. That cigar. It's like last year you had the that Royal Salomonis as your top cigar. Not an easy cigar to get, and not a cheap cigar either, but a great cigar. You can't argue with the selection.
Right. No, that's very interesting. I don't know. You got to strike a balance. I don't know if I want to create top 10 lists for everything, right? But obviously, we need to put a limit on that. We could be doing top 10 lists, top 10 Connecticut's, top 10 Perfectos. It's, it could go on forever.
It could go on forever. It really. There's fun in doing it. And then there's sometimes you'll take crap and they say, well, is it really worth it?
Right.
But I think it's fun. I do like how there are other online lists that they differ.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of people who are honest saying that some people are, I'm a little more scientific and some people aren't scientific. I don't think there's anything wrong with either way of doing that.
Right. I think as the consumer of all of this information that you should look at all the top lists that are out there, and you should probably make a small shopping list of ones that maybe you haven't smoked. Maybe choose 5 or 6 ones that you haven't smoked across all the lists, and go get them and try them. And I think for the most part, it's going to be money well spent. I think you're going to enjoy those cigars, right? If you find the ones that have been rated, and you find ones that you're like, well, I like my father, but maybe I haven't had one of those, Les Bijoux in a while. So maybe I'll go get one of those, or whatever. Maybe I tried, Nick or Steve Cigar, and I didn't have that size that they rated. So maybe I'll go back and try that size. And I think that's really the takeaway from this segment for me is to be debonair about it and really value everyone's opinion, and then go try some of the cigars on people's list that maybe you haven't tried, or maybe you tried that blend but not in that size. That's my advice.
One good example is number 16. They had the Avo Cinco Nicaragua. Now, they had the regular Toro as opposed to the special Toro 60.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of saying, well, maybe I'll go back and see if there's something more with that cigar. I did see another list today from Ben Lee.
Yeah.
A Stogie review, and he had Avo Cinco Nicaragua in that Toro, not the 60, as his number one.
Interesting.
And if he had it as his number one, I think I really respect Ben's palate. Yeah. I want to go back and give that size, because I've been going so much towards the 60, smoking that cigar.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back and smoke that one now, because now I'm seeing it a couple of other places.
Well, and it seems that size, that cigar works better in those larger sizes, because those are the 2 largest sizes in that line.
Yes. Yeah, they were. And I think I would agree with that. When I smoked the smaller sizes, they didn't do it as much for me.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. Excellent. Well, with that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and talk about our Stogies for this week. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.